what's up, gentlemen and ladies?
Happy National Day to the country of Spain.
So today's video is actually going to be on Agni's Philosophy, and some of you may be looking at me like, Dean, what the hell is Agni's Philosophy? What does it have to do with Final Fantasy? And more importantly, what does it potentially have to do with what could end up being Final Fantasy 16? To which I have to say, freaking watch the video and let me tell you. Now, I did actually make a video on Agni's Philosophy last year. Actually, I guess it would have been 2 years ago as of this point. But I figured I would make this video because it is, in my opinion, a topic that is worth revisiting, and it's more relevant now than it was then, in my opinion. Now, Agni's Philosophy is actually a it's not a game. To begin, it's not a movie, it's not a series, it's not like a short, it's not really any of those things. The first time that we saw it was actually E3 2012, funny enough, and it was shown off as let me actually explain to you guys. You know Square Enix, right? You know their series Final Fantasy? Okay. You know Final Fantasy 15. You know the engine that Final Fantasy 15 used? Well, it was a tech demo for that engine that we saw actually that's a lie. We saw it 2 times total. The first time was, like I said, at E3, where they showed off basically this whole scene that took place in a very sort of Middle Eastern inspired looking setting, which I will actually talk about in a little bit, starring this witch, you know, presumably named Agni, hence the name. Although I don't know, Agni could be the name of some kind of god. I mean, you know, God knows that Final Fantasy likes to do that kind of stuff, especially when it comes to the logos. Final Fantasy 15. Now, more so than anything, this was really just, like I said, meant to be a demo to show off the power of the Luminous engine and what it could do in terms of graphics, and for the time especially, it did not look half bad. When you take into consideration the second time that we saw it, which was actually titled, if I'm not mistaken, Chapter 0, which, Cry, or something like that for some reason. Don't ask me. I mean, I'm assuming that Agni here, I know that that's not confirmed to be her name, but that's just what I'm gonna call her. And knowing me, even though it's such a simple goddamn name, I know that I'm gonna manage to fuck up the pronunciation somehow. Should I call her Agni? I'm gonna call her Agni. So in the Chapter 0 stuff, not to be confused with Final Fantasy 15's Chapter 0, which is a whole different topic. But in the witch cry thing, it was titled that basically because we got to see the witch cry. The purpose of this was because, well, you know, from what a friend of mine told me, it was supposedly really hard at the time, especially in video games, to get characters crying, you know, just like having to do with all the face and the tears and all that kind of stuff. It was just something that was never really done too well in in-game engines, and somehow Square Enix managed to do it with this. I mean, it still doesn't look amazing, I'm not gonna lie, but it does look pretty good. Also, notice how even back then we had the weird, crazy looking hair on the characters. Yeah, they never did get around to fixing that, did they? Now, at the time especially, a lot of people, since, you know, Square Enix bothered to make this huge deal about it, didn't show it off at E3, which is obviously one of the biggest gaming conventions in the world, or events. I don't really think that you can call E3 a convention, but you know what I meant. Especially coming from a Japanese company, Square Enix of all, and not even modern Square Enix, 2012 Square Enix. What? That is unheard of. This is pre-Nomura 2013, people. Come on, pull it together. But yeah, a lot of people actually thought that this, of all things, was going to be Final Fantasy 15, especially because at the time, we had been hearing a lot of talk and rumors about Final Fantasy 15 since it was then that Square Enix internally had changed Versus 13 into 15, but they had not actually publicly announced it. That, and there was also all those rumors that Final Fantasy Versus had actually been cancelled, which, yeah, those are fun. But obviously, the year after that, in 2013, we did get to see what was at the time Versus 13 changed into Final Fantasy 15, and then we never really heard of Agnes again other than the previously mentioned Witch Cry thing. I feel like I'm literally just repeating myself at this point. So Final Fantasy, what does it have to do with that? Well, okay, clearly Square Enix has not forgotten about it since, again, they showed it off recently, whereas they could have probably just had a tech demo with Final Fantasy 15 characters or any other characters, but they specifically chose to use Agni, or Agni, whatever you prefer. And the fact that we have gotten a lot of concept art images as well as a full website for Agni's Philosophy that is still up to this day, I don't feel like they would take up that much effort and time for just a tech demo, guys. So what's the logical conclusion? Final Fantasy 16, obviously guys, it's confirmed Brave Exvius. I called it a year ago. Where's my 20 bucks? Okay, well, it may seem a little bit strange to immediately jump to the huge conclusion of Final Fantasy 16. It is worth noting that we probably are not going to be waiting too long before an announcement or something having to do with said game. I know. Final Fantasy 15 just came out. We're literally still getting DLC for it as we speak and will be for the next couple months presumably. But keep this in mind. Final Fantasies 9, 10, and 11 were all revealed at the same event. And later, Final Fantasies 13, Agito 13, which would go on to be Final Fantasy Type 0, and Versus 13, which would go on to be 15, were also announced in the same event. So as shitty of a tactic as it may be, Square Enix clearly is no stranger to having multiple big reveals going on at the same time. Especially when we take into consideration releases. In between Final Fantasy 12 and 13, there was 4 years. And then in between Final Fantasy 14 and 15, there was also 4 years. If they follow this pattern, which they could not, to be fair, but if they do, we could be looking at a release for Final Fantasy 16 of 2020, maybe 2021. And what better project to do it with than, well, this. I mean, it's already an established work. Yes, it may be obscure, like it's not a common household name. To be honest, most of Final Fantasy is not. But I'm sure that people will still remember, like, oh yeah, it was that thing that they showed off at E3 2012 or something like that. Wasn't that gonna be a game or something? And funny enough, if this does end up becoming 16 and Agni here is our protagonist, she will actually be the first Final Fantasy protagonist in the main series to not have blue eyes since the NES days. Think about that for a second. Like, the whole reason for this was basically because, for those of you guys that don't know, originally Final Fantasy 15 was gonna use the Crystal Tools engine from Final Fantasy 13. And boy, we all know how fucking awesome that engine was, right guys? With the development issues and the delays and all the problems internally and the teams not coordinating with each other, and it was awesome, guys. It turned out great. Not to mention the fact that pretty much the only non-13 game that they used it for was the original Final Fantasy 14. A game that was so bad Square Enix had to formally apologize for it. Suffice it to say, yes, they needed a new engine for Final Fantasy 15. Originally, this Luminous engine, that is what Agni was made for, was also going to be for several other Square Enix titles like Kingdom Hearts 3, but that also proved to not work because they were trying to implement it with the Kingdom Shader and a lot of stuff was just kind of going wrong. Eventually, they abandoned that and decided to just go with the Unreal 4 for Kingdom Hearts 3, which, to be honest with you guys, is probably what they're going to be using for future games in the series. Because even though it would be ironic for a game that was originally a tech demo for a specific engine to not actually end up using that engine, let's face it, Luminous has some major fucking issues. I'm not gonna sit here and rant about the graphics quality or just, you know, the performance of Final Fantasy 15 in general. There's plenty of people that have already done that, but let's just say Final Fantasy 15 felt a lot like Final Fantasy Versus 13, and not in the way that everybody wants this in the old story and characters, but as in a fucking PS3 game. But onto the actual concept of Agnes itself, what could they do with this? For one, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the setting, in my opinion, is great. We've had places in Final Fantasy based off, you know, Japan. There was that one that was based in Hong Kong. Obviously, all the old ones are like medieval Europe. You got steampunk. There was, I don't fucking know, the Arizona desert. But we've never really had a, like I said, Middle Eastern sort of inspired looking setting in a Final Fantasy game. There has been areas like that before, but never a full-on game. This looks pretty cool along with the characters itself because, I mean, I'm not even gonna lie, the concept of this just looks badass. Like, you getting to play as a witch and you're part of some kind of weird cult/church looking thing, and there's dragons and there's beasts that get injected that turn into like super beasts. Connection to the Fabula Nova Crystallis confirmed, guys. I'm making a video on it tomorrow. But seriously, this looked cool. Oh, now watch like them actually turn this into FF16, change a bunch of the stuff, and then people are gonna say like, oh, the original vision of Agni's Philosophy was much better than the final game. Final Fantasy 16 sucks. I can see it already, guys. I can see it already. But in all seriousness, I would actually really like to hear what you guys have to say on all of this. Would you be interested in this being a full game, even if it's not, you know, Final Fantasy 16? It could just be its own spin-off, like just Final Fantasy Agni's Philosophy or something like that. What do you like or dislike about it if you don't like this for whatever reason? Be sure to let me know in the comments. But either way, that is all that I have for you guys today. I hope that you guys enjoyed. If you did, be sure to blitz that like button, subscribe, and as always, stay tuned for all things Final Fantasy. See you guys.